You didn't stumble upon this moment by chance. As the world grows louder and the new year looms like a blank page, something quiet has started to stir inside you. It's not panic. It's not a rush of urgency. It's a subtle awareness, a recognition that this time change cannot be shallow, not just habits, not just routines, but the very ground you stand on. You're not simply drained by distractions or overbooked schedules. You're tired of the constant inner tug-of-war, the silent battle with your own thoughts. And that's where this moment finds you, not as a surge of motivation, but as a return to the part of yourself that longs for calm, that craves clarity, that remembers what it feels like to be whole. The Stoics understood that what we seek isn't out there in titles, noise, or applause. It exists in how we face life itself. They didn't pursue freedom as a destination. They lived it, moment by moment, breath by breath. And if that idea speaks to you, if you're ready to take a path defined by reason, strength, and quiet determination, let this be your starting point. A conscious decision to live with purpose, one step closer to the person you were always meant to be. Most people don't pay attention until everything starts falling apart. Careers crumble, relationships fracture, energy evaporates, and only then do they search desperately for answers. But the signs were always there, soft, persistent, overlooked. That nagging restlessness, even when life seems fine, that's the first warning. The quiet mental tension that lingers despite no visible chaos, that's the second. These aren't random annoyances. They're signals, indications that outward success hasn't reached inward alignment. True upheaval doesn't start with your schedule or circumstances. It begins in perception. Somewhere along the line you grew so used to reacting that you forgot how to respond intentionally. Days pass without thought. Emotions dictate without insight. Decisions come from pressure, not principle. These are the hidden cracks that over time can shatter everything. It's tempting to blame the world, the deadlines, the expectations, the relentless noise. But look closer. It's not the world that unsettles you. It's a lack of awareness of your own mind. You gave up control and settled for automatic reactions. As Epictetus taught, life is shaped not by events themselves, but by how we meet them. Yet most never pause to examine their own responses. Anger flares and words spill. Fear rises and they flee. Fatigue settles in and they quit. No pause, no thought, just instinct. But you are neither animal nor machine. You are a thinking, feeling being, and depth requires awareness. Every real transformation starts at the same point, the moment you stop saying, "I don't know why I act like this," and begin asking, "What am I avoiding seeing?" Awareness isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's the instant you notice a routine is just repetition, not meaning. When anxiety stops feeling like punishment and begins revealing itself as a signal, your mind urging you to wake up, you don't need to destroy your life to change it. You need to stop moving through it unconsciously. When life becomes constant reaction, even small disruptions feel catastrophic. One message ruins your mood. One glance undermines your confidence. One mistake sends you spinning. Not because life is harsh, but because you've lost contact with your center. This is what Stoicism teaches so clearly. Your mind is your home. Neglect it, and everything outside can take command. You cannot control the winds, but you can fortify your inner citadel. The upheaval isn't here to destroy you. It's here to reveal what was built on shaky ground. Anything that collapses under pressure was never meant to carry you forward. Carl Jung warned that until the unconscious is made conscious, it rules your life, and you mistake it for fate. Many shy away from this truth. Seeing clearly means accepting responsibility. Not blame, responsibility. And responsibility is freedom. Once you recognize the patterns you never questioned, You stop expecting new outcomes from the same old actions. You pause, you reflect, you begin to change. Awareness is the birthplace of transformation, but it's uncomfortable. It exposes fear driving your day. Fear of falling behind, missing out, or not being enough. It reveals how busyness can disguise a lack of purpose. This confrontation can feel like a breakdown, but it's a breakthrough. Only when the false self loosens its grip does the real self emerge. This is why the coming year must be different, not louder, not faster, not piled with goals on a fractured foundation, but deeper, more honest, more grounded. You're not here to perform a slightly better version of the same self. You're here to return to what is real beneath the noise. The inner turbulence isn't meant to ruin you. It's meant to show where awareness was absent, where comfort replaced growth, where the world's volume drowned out your inner wisdom. When you face that disruption with awareness instead of panic, with reason instead of reflex, everything begins to shift. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because you grow steadier, clearer, quieter within. And from that inner calm, you don't just endure life, you actively shape it. So the real question isn't how to stop the earthquake. The question is, what have you been building on unstable ground? Once you recognize it, you can rebuild. Once you feel it, you can start listening. And once true awareness arrives, there's no going back to unconscious sleep. Not because awareness is simple, but because living without it becomes unbearable. Growth begins the moment you stop fleeing your inner tremors and move toward their source. Within you lies a place that remains unmoved even as the world shifts. It doesn't wobble under criticism. It doesn't crumble when plans fail. It doesn't need permission to feel whole. The Stoics called this the inner citadel, not as a metaphor, but as a lived reality. Somewhere along the way, you stopped visiting it. Life pulled you outward, into roles, obligations, and identities. You started believing that peace was something earned or granted by others, but it was never outside. It was simply forgotten. Every surge of panic, every shallow breath, every racing thought stems from the same illusion that the world can reach inside and determine your worth. That someone's words or silence could dismantle who you are. But they cannot. They only seem able to when you're disconnected from your center. This fortress isn't built from stone, it's built from stillness. It isn't defended by walls, but by awareness. And the more you remember this, the less life's resistance will shake you. Marcus Aurelius taught that the soul takes on the hue of its thoughts. Here lies the trap. You don't need chaos around you to feel overwhelmed. You only need chaotic thinking. You don't need real danger to feel fear. Only the belief that the inner voice speaks truth. That voice doesn't come from your citadel. It comes from what you absorbed, from comparison, urgency, and the need to perform. Your inner fortress never demanded performance. It only asks you to return. There's a quiet suffering that comes when you keep trying to fix what was never broken. You chase approval, push for productivity, demand constant improvement, believing peace will arrive once you've done enough. But peace is not a reward for self-criticism. It grows from self-trust. True strength isn't about adding more onto yourself. It's about releasing what was never yours to carry. That is what the inner fortress gives you, a space untouched by external chaos. No matter how loud life becomes, it cannot disturb what is anchored in stillness. Many assume peace comes when noise fades, circumstances improve, or people act differently. But that peace is fragile, dependent on conditions. When they fail, when you're misunderstood, plans collapse, certainty disappears. What remains? The fortress isn't an escape. It's the ability to stay grounded within life. When you remember how to rest in your own presence, the world loses its power to dictate your inner state. You don't rebuild it with force or pressure. You return quietly, through honesty, through stillness, through moments of confronting truth even when it hurts. You start to realize you are not what others label you, not your title, your paycheck, or past mistakes. Not even the thoughts you've repeated for years. You are the awareness observing them, the conscious presence that chooses what to hold space for and what to release. Seneca wrote that no one is more unfortunate than someone who never faces adversity, for they never get to know themselves. Perhaps this moment exists for that reason, not to avoid discomfort, but to recognize that it cannot destroy you unless you forget who you are. Every unsettling emotion asks the same question: have you stepped outside your inner ground? Anxiety arises when you compare yourself to what's beyond your control. Anger appears when you hand your calm to someone else. Desperation emerges when you tie your peace to specific outcomes. This isn't weakness, it's forgetfulness. The solution isn't achieving more, it's returning to yourself. The door to your calm was never locked. You were simply knocking in all the wrong places. No success, recognition, or certainty can replace the stability that comes from being centered. Returning to your inner citadel doesn't make you distant, it makes you clear. You don't reject life, you approach it differently, with less urgency, with intention instead of impulse. You learn to protect your time, your attention, and your values, not through force, but through quiet resolve. Because now you know what truly belongs to you and what never did. Aristotle said that knowing yourself is the start of wisdom. But this knowing goes beyond labels and history. It's recognizing the part of you that stays untouched by loss, unaffected by praise, steady through change. That's the fortress. And the more familiar you are with it, the less dependent you are on life unfolding perfectly. Carl Jung described the self as a center everywhere and a boundary nowhere. Seen this way, the fortress isn't hiding. It's a way of living. It allows you to move through the world rooted, to experience joy without clinging, sorrow without breaking, praise without inflation, and rejection without collapse. This isn't indifference. It's inner order, and inner order is rare and powerful. You won't often be reminded to return. The world constantly pulls you outward into reaction, comparison, and performance. That's why you must pause when you wake up, when focus drifts, when words echo too loudly. Ask, have I stepped away from my center, and then choose to return, not by escaping life, but by being present, by breathing, by letting go of what was never yours to carry. The fortress isn't imaginary, it's your birthright, but it must be remembered, nurtured, and entered daily. Storms will come, winds will howl, but with an internal foundation, you are no longer dragged every which way. You don't need everything to be calm, you only need to remember where calm truly lives. And it has been waiting for you all along. Most people spend their lives trying to control what was never theirs. They structure their days around uncertainty, worry about how they're seen, and cling to the idea that peace will come once the outside world settles. But it never does. And deep down, you already know that. You've felt it. Every time you tried to manage someone else's opinion and ended up drained. Every time you mapped out a perfect future and watched it unravel. Every time you gave your energy to things that never asked for it. There is a subtle suffering in believing you can control the uncontrollable. No matter how tightly you grip, life continues to flow. Here's the truth that changes everything. Control is not a feeling, it's a choice, and it has nothing to do with the world. It has everything to do with you. You cannot dictate outcomes. You cannot command others. But you can choose how you respond. You can decide who you will be amid uncertainty. That choice may feel quieter than controlling the world, but it is the only power that cannot be taken from you. This is what the Stoics called the dichotomy of control, the clear boundary between what belongs to you and what doesn't. When you live by that boundary, clarity emerges. Consider all the energy you've wasted trying to influence what cannot change. Unanswered messages, missed opportunities, misunderstandings. You think preparation lies in anticipation and worry, but worry is not preparation. It's resistance, disguised as strategy, and it drains you. What if that energy went instead to what you can shape? Your thoughts, your intentions, your character. Imagine the strength that grows when you stop forcing the world and instead stand calmly within it. Emotions pass, highs fade, panic dissolves, but your choices remain. How you respond to disappointment, how you speak when anger rises, how you move forward when plans collapse. These choices shape your life far more than anything beyond your control. The Stoics never promised comfort. They promised clarity. Clarity stops you from wasting strength on storms you were never meant to stop. Seneca reminded us that much of our suffering exists only in imagination. Look closely, and you'll see pain often comes not from events, but from resisting them. You once thought control meant changing outcomes. Real control is changing interpretation. When you stop needing everything to go your way, peace begins. Not because life softens, but because your mind steadies. Many mistake control for tension. They think being in control means constant alertness, correcting, anticipating. But that is fear, and fear breeds reactivity. It convinces you that effort guarantees certainty. The Stoic does not seek certainty. The Stoic seeks alignment with reason, virtue, and deliberate choice. When you align with what lies within your power, the rest loses its grip. Relief comes when you stop managing the uncontrollable, when you stop measuring your worth against others' reactions. When you do your part fully and release the rest, this is not passivity. This is mastery. It takes strength to focus only on your side of the equation. It takes clarity to remain still while the world spins. That stillness is not detachment, it is wisdom. Epictetus said, "Freedom is achieved by letting go of what lies beyond our control." That freedom doesn't feel forced. It feels like space, room in your chest, quiet in your mind. When you stop carrying outcomes, you move differently. You act from clarity, not desperation. Speak from integrity, not approval seeking. Give without attachment. Release without panic. The world will shift, people will misunderstand, plans will fail. That will not change. What must change is your relationship to it all. You are not here to micromanage life. You are here to act with intention, fulfill your role, and let go. Not because it doesn't matter, but because that's where responsibility ends and real power begins. Even Aristotle emphasized that virtue resides in deliberate choice, not emotion or impulse. So the question isn't, can I control this? The question is this mine to control at all? If it isn't yours to suffer over either. Once you grasp this, you start protecting your peace as you protect your time. You stop giving it to opinions, headlines, or someone else's emotional storms. You say, "This is not mine," and let it pass. That is not avoidance, that is clarity. And clarity brings a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. A peace that holds you steady while everything else moves. You reach a turning point when you stop giving away your most valuable asset, your response, to things that never deserved it. Control is not stumbled upon, it is chosen. And the more consistently you claim what belongs to you, the stronger you become. Not because you bend the world, but because the world no longer bends you. That strength is quiet, it doesn't boast, yet it transforms everything, starting from within. You may have felt it before, life pushing back no matter how carefully you plan. You prepare, you push, you do everything right, and still things go off course. Delays appear, detours interrupt, disappointments strike. So you tighten your grip. You try harder, you think more, and without realizing it, your inner peace becomes a battlefield. But life cannot be overpowered. It cannot be forced into stillness. Life moves like a river, and rivers do not respond to pressure. Most people aren't tired because they move too fast. They're tired because they resist the current. Fatigue doesn't come from effort, but from friction, from fighting what already is. You can see it clearly. Every inconvenience feels personal. Every challenge feels like an attack. But life isn't targeting you. It is flowing, and when you stand rigid in that current, you aren't punished. You're pulled under. Not cruelty, just physics. Force meets flow. Letting go is often misunderstood. Many hear it as surrender or weakness, but acceptance is not defeat. It's strategy. Letting go doesn't mean doing nothing. It means refusing to spend energy on what cannot change. That refusal is strength. It's clarity. It's the moment your real power begins to rise. When you stop fighting the current, you learn to move with it, to adjust, to redirect, to advance without exhausting yourself. There is grace in knowing when to pivot instead of push, when the issue isn't the plan but the mindset. Sometimes you don't need a new strategy. You just need to stop, insisting that life mirrors your expectations. The Stoics never promoted passivity. They taught precision, seeing things as they are, not as you wish them to be. Control feels safe, but if that were true, the most controlling people would be the calmest. Rarely are they. Control agitates the mind because it ties your peace to things that were never meant to be stable. Markets, weather, schedules, other people's actions. Every time you demand stability from these things, you hand your peace over to uncertainty. That's not strength, that's dependence. What you need isn't to stop the river, it's to understand its rhythm. Some days call for adjustment, others for stillness. Sometimes they demand letting go of what you thought you needed most. That isn't failure, it's intelligent movement forward. Carl Jung noted that what we resist persists and often grows stronger. The more you fight, the more control it seems to have over you. But the moment you release the struggle, its weight lessens, not because the situation changed, but because your relationship to it did. You've experienced this. The difficult conversation you avoided, only to realize it wasn't catastrophic. The loss that opened a door you never imagined, the plan that failed, making room for something better. None of these shifts came from force, they came from trust. Not blind faith, but trust in your ability to respond wisely. This is how you navigate the river, not drifting aimlessly, but guiding yourself with presence, not panic. Slowly you see that when life doesn't go your way, it isn't necessarily wrong. You just don't see the whole picture yet. You're not meant to. Your task isn't to control what's ahead, it's to meet what's here. That understanding lightens the load, the pressure to predict, manage, manipulate. It doesn't make you careless, it makes you discerning. You care without clinging, you act without gripping. Your peace is no longer hostage to whether life follows your script. Epictetus reminded us that events themselves are neutral. Their power comes from our judgment. The surge in the river isn't the enemy. The turn in the current isn't failure. It's movement. Your strength is in how you meet it. Do you tense and sink, or breathe, adjust, and continue? Even Plato, in his own way, spoke of adaptability. Wisdom isn't force, it's alignment, recognizing patterns and moving in harmony with what is. Wisdom isn't rigidity, it's purpose-guided flexibility. When you cultivate that inner flexibility, nothing breaks you. You bend, you shift, you stay whole. If you feel worn down, overwhelmed by holding everything together, it may not be weakness. It may be because you've been trying to stop a river with your bare hands. Maybe it's time to loosen your grip, not in surrender, but in strategy, to glide instead of strain, to work with life, not against it. This year isn't asking you to fight harder. It's asking you to move smarter, to stop demanding that everything bend to your will, and notice how much lighter life becomes when you move with its rhythm. That isn't giving up. It's growing up, choosing clarity over control, presence over panic, direction over resistance. Let go, not because you don't care, but because your energy is too valuable for pointless battles. Let go so you can finally move forward. Most people wait for perfect conditions to feel okay. They wait for clear skies, calm winds, certainty before they breathe fully or act. But life doesn't work that way. Storms linger, light arrives late, yet you are not powerless. Your power was never in controlling the sky. It's in tending the ground beneath your feet. Think of your mind as soil. Whatever grows there, strength or doubt, clarity or fear, depends on what is planted and nurtured. Left unattended, it doesn't stay neutral. It grows whatever falls into it. This is where many lose their way. They wait, distract themselves, and look outward for better conditions. Meanwhile, unwanted habits take root. Doubts spread. Avoidance settles. Small fears grow deep underground. One day, they surface in a life that no longer reflects who you truly are. But you don't need perfect weather to grow something meaningful. You need daily care, awareness, the willingness to notice what's growing and ask whether it aligns with your choice. To remove what doesn't belong, not with frustration, but with attention. The mind is not a battlefield, it's a garden. Even neglected soil can be restored. That is the quiet miracle. No matter how overgrown, renewal is possible. If you begin today, ask yourself, what are you feeding? What thoughts do you repeat? What habits do you nurture? Every repeated idea is a seed. Every ignored feeling sends roots deeper. Just because damage isn't visible doesn't mean it isn't forming. Over time, thoughts become patterns. Patterns shape identity, and identity starts to look like fate. But fate isn't fixed. It is simply the result of what you've cultivated, intentionally or not. Seneca warned that true poverty isn't having little, it's always wanting more. In a world pushing you to chase, control, and accumulate endlessly, real wealth is different. It lives inside, a steady mind, clear values, inner sufficiency that storms cannot uproot. The danger comes when you blame the weather, when you forget that tending your own ground has always been your responsibility. Every gardener eventually learns this. Wind will blow, heat will scorch, and rain sometimes comes too late or too hard. No one is exempt. The difference isn't the weather, it's how each gardener prepares, adapts, and returns to the soil every day, regardless of the forecast. That is the essence of Stoicism. Not emotional numbness, but discipline. Not escaping life, but finding clarity within it. Peace isn't something you wait for, it's something you build, slowly, intentionally. One thought examined, one routine honored. One morning, you show up when it's easier to stay in bed. One uncomfortable truth you finally stop avoiding. Inner stability grows not from dramatic leaps, but from consistent attention. Then come the cold seasons. Days that feel frosty, when hope seems burned away and you wonder if anything meaningful can grow again. Stoicism never promised immunity from these moments. It acknowledged them. These seasons prune, test, and expose shallow roots, forcing deeper ones to form. They show what endures and what was only temporary support. You don't run from these periods. You study them. You learn what failed and why. You refine your focus, so when warmth returns, you know exactly where to invest your energy. Growth doesn't come from avoiding hardship. It comes from letting hardship teach you. Aristotle reminded us that we become what we repeatedly do. Excellence isn't a single act. It's a habit quietly formed over time. It's not about grand gestures or dramatic reinvention. It's about returning to the soil daily, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when progress isn't visible. Every time you remove what drains you, you create space for what strengthens you. Every time you nurture a better habit, you reinforce your foundation. Even on days when change isn't obvious, your presence matters. Growth often happens beneath the surface long before it becomes visible. When you pause before reacting, you tend your inner ground. When you choose clarity over chaos, you deepen your roots. When you resist measuring yourself against someone else's harvest, you protect your peace. A true gardener doesn't envy other gardens, they commit to their own. This is your space, your mind, your values. Storms will come, but they pass. Weeds can be cleared, soil can be renewed. What matters most is that you don't abandon your garden, that you don't hand responsibility for your inner world to forces that were never meant to care for it. Your inner life is your responsibility. The more you honor that truth, the more stable you become. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength isn't loud, it doesn't demand attention. It's steady, rooted, quietly reliable. It adapts instead of arguing with reality. It keeps going. Perhaps this isn't the year to control everything. Perhaps it's the year to care deeply for what already belongs to you. Your thoughts, your space, your attention. Let the storms come. Let the winds rise. You have discipline, awareness, choice. Most importantly, you have your garden. Don't wait for peace to arrive by chance. Plant it, water it, protect it. It's already inside you, and it's been waiting. Now consider a single moment. You arrive late. A meeting has already started. A payment doesn't clear. Someone speaks carelessly, and it stings more than expected. The event is real, but the weight, the emotion, the spiral that comes from the meaning you attach to it. Suddenly, being late becomes a story about failure. Losing money becomes a sign of collapse. A careless remark becomes proof you aren't enough. Those conclusions aren't facts. They're judgments, and judgment, more than circumstance, causes most suffering. We often think pain comes from the outside, but the deepest wounds are self-inflicted when we accept thoughts without questioning them. The mind doesn't just record reality, it interprets it. Interpretation shapes everything. That's why two people can experience the same setback and walk away differently. One sees defeat, one sees insight, one sees rejection, one sees redirection. Same moment, different lens. This is where Stoicism shines. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about understanding where emotion begins. Most suffering comes not from events, but from the mental chain reaction that follows. The assumptions, self-blame, imagined catastrophes. Carl Jung warned about projections, the unconscious stories we cast onto people and situations. Until we recognize them, we respond not to reality, but to distortion. A single criticism becomes a verdict on your worth. You withdraw, you defend, you reshape yourself to avoid imagined judgment, all based on an interpretation that may not be true. What makes this dangerous is its speed, a glance, a tone, a delay. And before awareness catches up, the judgment has already written a narrative in your mind. The Stoics trained themselves to pause, to notice the story forming and ask, what am I telling myself? Is it useful? Is it true? Most people never stop to ask. They confuse thought with truth, but a thought is only a lens, and lenses can be cleaned. Aristotle said that an educated mind can consider an idea without accepting it. You can feel an emotion without surrendering. You can observe judgment rising without obeying it. This isn't suppression, it's sovereignty. When you slow down and investigate instead of reacting, you create space. In that space, you regain choice. This practice isn't glamorous. It won't impress anyone, but it spares you unnecessary suffering. There are real losses to grieve, real injustices to confront. But clarity matters. Being disrespected is real. Concluding you're worthless is not. Falling short is feedback, not a sentence. The Stoics weren't emotionless. They were disciplined. Emotions signal but don't always explain. Your task is to listen, question, and refine until you reach something solid. Judgments often disguise themselves as truth, but many are defenses against uncertainty. Meaning isn't fixed. You can revise it. You can replace panic with presence if you pause long enough to notice the lens you're using. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke." This isn't abstract philosophy. It's a survival skill. The moment you stop granting your judgments unchecked authority, you reclaim your life. You feel the setback without collapsing. You see the flaw without becoming it. This is where freedom begins, not by changing the world, but by refining how you meet it. Life remains unpredictable. People remain imperfect, but your inner state doesn't have to suffer for it. Next time something happens, pause. Ask yourself, is this fact or fear wearing certainty's mask? That moment won't change the event, but it will change how you carry it, and how you carry it changes everything. Judgment is a lens. Clean it often. And remember, you can always choose a clearer view. You walk into a room scanning faces, not for danger, but for approval. A nod lifts you, silence deflates you. It feels natural, social, human. But beneath it lies a quiet habit most never question. You've tied your worth to other people's reactions, people who may not even remember your name. And slowly, silently, it drains you. Not all at once, but day by day. Eventually, almost everyone notices this pattern. We survive by blending in, pleasing, reading the room, adjusting ourselves like a reflection, becoming what feels safest. And yes, it sometimes works. Conflict avoided, approval earned, acceptance felt, but beneath the surface, something subtle begins. You forget what it's like to speak without waiting for a response, to move without checking who's watching. Life becomes performance, every word rehearsed, every action measured, always seeking applause. That isn't living. That's slowly leaving yourself behind. Carl Jung once said the greatest privilege in life is becoming who you truly are. But becoming doesn't require rebellion or coldness. It requires detachment. The quiet strength of someone who no longer needs approval to feel worthy. When your sense of self depends on others' opinions, you become a voluntary prisoner. The cage isn't locked, it's built from your need to be liked. Every time someone reacts differently than you hoped, the walls tighten. Here's the uncomfortable truth: you've always had the key. Seneca warned that those who live for approval hand their lives to others. He wasn't condemning connection, he was cautioning against dependence. There's a line between caring about people and being controlled by their reactions. That line is crossed every time you betray yourself to make someone else comfortable. Every time you soften your truth. Every time you stay silent to avoid rejection. Every time you agree just to keep the peace. But peace doesn't come from compliance. It comes from alignment with your values, your voice, your direction. There's a quieter version of you waiting behind the curtain. Not louder, not flashier, just honest. The one who speaks clearly, even when their voice shakes. The one who walks away when something feels wrong, even if standing alone is the cost. That version doesn't chase admiration, it seeks wholeness, and that shift, when you stop auditioning for roles that were never yours, is where real confidence begins. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that doesn't need it. The world will always comment on your choices, your work, your courage, your silence. If you bend to every opinion, you don't gain adaptability, you hollow yourself out. An identity built on approval has no foundation. Praise comes one day, questioning the next. You cannot build inner stability on something that changes with the wind. That's like trying to build a home during an earthquake. Instead of asking, "Do they like me?" ask, "Do I respect myself right now?" That question brings you back to center. You can win the crowd, yet lose yourself. Applause isn't alignment. Being noticed isn't being known. This isn't rebellion. It's a return to your core. You're not here to impress. You're here to express. Not to prove worth, but to live it. You don't need louder opinions. You need a quieter mind. One that doesn't flinch at disagreement. One that doesn't collapse under criticism. That's the difference between chasing peace and becoming it. You are not a product, a brand, or the sum of likes, shares, or nods. You are human, complex, layered, imperfect, and your truth won't always fit into someone else's comfort zone. Sometimes the strongest move isn't explaining, not convincing. It's standing still, rooted in who you are, even if no one applauds. Think about how much energy you've spent adjusting for others. Now imagine returning that energy home, creating because it matters to you, speaking because it's true, showing up without masks, filters, or constant reassurance that life isn't loud, but it's free. And freedom never asks permission. The path away from approval dependence isn't isolation, it's discernment. Knowing when feedback helps you grow and when it's just noise meant to shrink you. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every rejection deserves your retreat. You don't need to become cold to be free. You only need to stop negotiating your worth in every room you enter. The most powerful people are rarely the loudest. They don't panic when misunderstood. They don't chase validation like oxygen. They move with quiet authority, built over years of choosing integrity over popularity. That isn't arrogance, it's self-respect. You've spent enough time editing yourself to fit spaces that weren't made for you. Now it's time to build something of your own. A mindset, a mission, a life that doesn't require applause to feel alive. You are not here to be liked, you are here to become. Becoming is rarely celebrated, often unseen, but always worth it. Because when you stop begging the world to recognize you, you finally recognize yourself. In that moment, something loosens, the cage fades, the hunger quiets, peace returns. Not because the world changed, but because you stopped giving it the keys. Often, the strongest person in the room is the quietest, not because they lack words, but because they've already spoken the truth to themselves enough that it doesn't need announcing. In a world addicted to noise, dominance, and performance, there is a rare kind of power that doesn't demand attention. It simply exists, calm, grounded, unmoved. We're taught that power must be loud, that it must occupy space and declare itself. But look closely at those who've mastered themselves. They don't rush to correct. They don't fight to win. They choose restraint, not weakness, but control. That strength is built privately, in discipline, in silence. In moments when no one is watching, Seneca reminded us that humanity's greatest resources already exist within us, strength included. Not the kind you display, but the kind you earn by outgrowing reactions and no longer needing to be louder, just to feel seen. When you're grounded, your presence speaks for you. Nothing is more unsettling than someone who cannot be provoked. They don't flinch, they don't chase approval. Speaking to them feels like speaking to solid ground. Strength isn't being emotionless. It's knowing what deserves movement and what doesn't. It's letting feelings rise, letting them pass, and still choosing your response deliberately. Control doesn't shout. It observes, it waits, and it acts only when it matters. Silence isn't always passivity. Some silence carries weight. In this world, you don't need more noise. You need less inner chaos, less reacting, less explaining. Be so aligned with who you are that you stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. That urge to dominate conversations weakens you. What strengthens you is the stillness that comes after you let it go. Jung once said, loneliness doesn't come from being alone, but from being unable to express what truly matters. Yet those who walk deeply eventually realize they don't need to explain everything. They live it. Their life becomes the message, their consistency the proof, their quiet presence undeniable. You don't need to be louder to be heard. You need clarity within yourself. Clarity doesn't scream. It speaks once and moves on. That is the art of strength, to set boundaries without begging, to walk away without threats, to lead without applause. True strength doesn't rise from ego, it rises from purpose. Like a tree in a storm, it doesn't argue with the wind, it stays rooted. A tree doesn't argue with the wind, it doesn't protest the rain, it simply stands, rooted, present, steady. That's who you become when you stop reacting to every challenge, when you understand that not every provocation deserves a response. When you start treating your energy like currency, because it is. Every time you're dragged into pointless conflict, every time you defend your character to someone who never intended to respect it, you give away strength you'll never reclaim. This year, you take it back, not by shouting louder, but by standing firmer. People confuse power with fearlessness. Real power isn't the absence of fear. It's calm within fear. It's not never doubting yourself. It's refusing to let doubt drive your choices. It's holding uncertainty without letting it hijack your direction. The most unsettling thing you can do is remain steady while the world trembles. That isn't indifference. That's mastery, and mastery is quiet. The strongest presence in any room isn't loud or aggressive. It's the one who cannot be baited, the one who won't be pulled into chaos, the one who knows themselves so well they don't need validation. That's the gift of intentional silence. Not withdrawal, leverage, not apathy, strategy. You can care deeply and still choose when to respond. You can love fully and still conserve your energy. Silence doesn't equal fear. It can mean you're so grounded that nothing outside can shake you. Between what happens and how you respond, stillness becomes your advantage. Not passive, but intentional. That pause lets wisdom replace reflex. That pause builds an inner fortress, one others feel even if they can't name it. This year isn't asking you to be louder, it's asking you to be anchored. To stop wasting breath on distractions, to let actions speak louder than words, to let results establish credibility. When your focus sharpens, your energy becomes undeniable. People notice, not because you demand attention, but because you've stopped asking for it. Let this be the year you stop debating with people who aren't building what you're building. Step out of the noise. Step into your own rhythm. Let your stillness be your shield. Nothing unsettles the world more than someone who cannot be shaken. And once your silence speaks for you, you realize that was the strength you were searching for all along. Most people try to survive their past. Few learn to love it, and love here doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean enjoying the pain. It means refusing to let it own you. This is amor fati, the love of fate, not poetry. A discipline, a decision. It's the moment you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what will I make of it now? Sometimes life collapses everything you relied on. A betrayal, a loss, a future you counted on, gone. Your instincts beg for escape, to rewind, to erase pain, but you cannot. No one can. And once you accept that, you face the deeper choice. Will the past define you or refine you? Amor fati doesn't mean enjoying the storm. It means growing because of it. Taking the broken pieces and building something stronger. Using the silence left by loss to hear your own voice. Letting failure sharpen you instead of shrinking you. Over time, what felt like punishment becomes preparation. Marcus Aurelius wrote that fire turns everything it touches into fuel. That's amor fati, not passive acceptance, but transformation. Not bitterness, but clarity. You weren't meant to remain untouched. You were meant to be shaped. What broke you? What humbled you? What stripped illusion from your sight? That wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a deeper story. Sometimes, you must lose your way to find a path that only appears when control disappears. Not built on perfection, but on courage. Not certainty, but clarity. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Every day you cling to a different past, you delay that becoming. Amor fati isn't blind optimism. It's radical honesty, facing the wound and saying, "You no longer own me," letting pain exist without letting it define you. You can resist reality forever, or you can unclench your fists and build from exactly where you stand. Maybe the worst thing that happened to you gave you the tools to become unbreakable. Maybe what you hated most forced your deepest growth. Fate isn't a fixed path. It's raw material, and what you make of it depends on your choices. Nothing easy builds depth. Nothing smooth carves wisdom. Growth comes from falling apart, from sitting in silence long enough to hear yourself again, from realizing that while you cannot choose every event, you can choose how it shapes you. The moment you understand that, your relationship with life changes. You stop fearing loss. You stop being surprised by difficulty. You meet life with a steady heart, not because it's easy, but because you no longer demand easy. Epictetus reminded us, don't wish events away. Align with how they unfold, not surrender, strength. You stop rewriting the past. You use it. Every heartbreak, every failure, every mistake. Not burdens, resources. When you mine them for meaning, you become untouchable. Someone who no longer fears fate cannot be controlled by outcomes. That's the hidden gift of amor fati. Freedom from your history. The courage to say, this too is mine, and I will turn it into fuel. Your past doesn't need revision. It needs understanding. Every scar a lesson, every regret a redirection. Every wound a quiet guide back to yourself. When you finally say, even this I accept, you become unshakable. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because nothing can own you. It doesn't fight the wind. It doesn't complain about the rain. It stands, rooted, unmoved. That's who you become when you stop reacting to every challenge, when you start treating your energy like a limited resource. Every unnecessary argument drains you. Every time you explain yourself to someone who doesn't care, you give away strength. This year, take it back. Not louder, steadier. Power isn't fearlessness. It's calm in the presence of fear. It's refusing to let doubt dictate your actions. Strength is holding uncertainty without being controlled by it, remaining grounded while the world trembles. That's not distance. That's mastery. And mastery never announces itself. It doesn't need noise. The most formidable person isn't the loudest. They cannot be provoked. They won't be manipulated. They know who they are and don't get pulled into chaos. That's intentional silence. Not withdrawal, but leverage. Not indifference, but clarity. You can care and still choose restraint, love and still respond selectively. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It can mean you're so grounded nothing external shakes you. Between what happens and how you respond, there is a space. And in that space, silence becomes power. Not passive silence, but deliberate stillness. The kind that lets you pause, assess and act from clarity instead of impulse. That stillness becomes your inner fortress. Others sense it, even if they can't name it. This year isn't asking you to be louder or push harder. It's asking you to be anchored, to stop wasting breath on distractions, to let results speak louder than explanations, to let consistency build your credibility. When your focus sharpens, your presence becomes undeniable, not because you demand it, but because you no longer chase it. Step away from arguments that don't serve your life. Step out of the noise. Step into your own rhythm. Let your stillness be your shield. Nothing unsettles the world more than someone who cannot be shaken. Most people spend their lives surviving the past. Few truly make peace with it. Peace doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean enjoying what hurt you. It means refusing to let it define or destroy you. This is amor fati, love of fate. Not optimism, not poetry, discipline, choice. Stop asking, why did this happen? Start asking, what will I make of it? There will come a moment, sometimes quiet, sometimes shattering, when everything you relied on collapses. A betrayal, a loss, a future you counted on, gone. Your instinct begs to escape, to rewind, to erase the pain. But you cannot. No one can. And when you accept that, a new question arises. Will the past control me, or will I carry it differently? Amor fati isn't enjoying the storm. It's growing because of it, using broken pieces to build something stronger, listening to the silence left behind. Letting failure refine you instead of breaking you. What once felt like punishment reveals itself as preparation. Marcus Aurelius said fire turns everything thrown into it into flame. That is fate, not passive, but transformative. You weren't meant to remain untouched. You were meant to be shaped. What shattered your certainty? What humbled your ego? What stripped illusions? That wasn't the end. It was the beginning of depth. Sometimes losing your way uncovers a path that only appears when nothing is left to protect. And when you stop resisting what has happened, something shifts. You stop fearing loss. You stop being surprised by hardship. You meet life steadily, not because it's easy, but because you no longer demand easy. Epictetus taught, don't force life to happen your way. Align with how it unfolds. That is not surrender. That is strength. Use the past. Every scar instructs. Every regret redirects. Every wound guides you back to yourself. The one who no longer fears fate cannot be controlled by outcomes. Their power is resilience. Fear, too, has been misunderstood. We treat it like a stop sign, but it's often a doorway. The Stoics didn't try to eliminate fear. They trained to understand it. Through premeditatio malorum, preparing for difficulty, they removed its surprise. Fear feeds on uncertainty. Preparation removes its authority. Most suffering happens before the event, not during it. We exaggerate pain, underestimate endurance. That gap is where fear lives. Face it, and it shrinks. Avoid it, and it grows. When you stop running, fear becomes information, a signal pointing toward growth. Strength isn't acting without fear, it's acting with it anyway. And finally, there is death. Not as an ending, but as urgency. Memento mori isn't dark, it awakens. When you remember time is limited, hesitation loses power. You stop delaying truth. You stop postponing life. Death doesn't take meaning, it sharpens it. You eat slower, you listen more. You stop assuming there will always be another chance. Tragedy isn't dying. It's never fully living. When mortality becomes your teacher, every moment asks, is this how I want to spend my life? And when you answer honestly, you stop existing and start living deliberately. Life isn't a rehearsal. This is it. Remembering mortality doesn't create fear. It creates presence. Seneca warned, life isn't short. We simply waste most of it. We lose it not because death comes, but because we hand our energy away to things that add nothing. We scatter attention on gossip. We exhaust ourselves in pointless battles. We delay what matters, thinking there's always more time. Every distraction is a quiet surrender, a trade, time for emptiness. But when you remember life is finite, the unnecessary falls away. Noise loses its grip. Drama feels smaller. Other people's opinions weigh less. You move lighter, not because life is easier, but because you stop carrying burdens that were never yours. You speak honestly, take risks, release attachments, understand nothing is permanent, and that doesn't imprison you, it liberates you. Even love changes. You hold people closer, forgive sooner, speak with intention. You live so fully that if tomorrow never comes, very little remains unsaid. This isn't panic, it's wisdom. Time was never promised. That is what makes today sacred. Even failure looks different. It's no longer shame. It's proof you tried, that you risked, that you were awake. With mortality in mind, you stop obsessing over outcomes. You show up for the process, not because it's easy, but because it's real and it's yours. Aristotle believed the good life isn't about length, but virtue, not duration, but quality. Living well isn't applause, it's alignment. It's honoring values, even when it costs. Walking a lonely path because it's honest. When the final moment comes, you won't recall perfection, you'll recall presence, truth, vitality. Don't waste this life scrolling past it. Don't silence your soul to fit a version of yourself you've outgrown. Let death teach urgency, not fear. Let it awaken you so fully you never drift again. Because remembering death isn't mourning what you'll lose. It's seeing what you have and giving it everything. Not someday, not when ready. Now, this breath, this heartbeat, that is enough. Justice comes next, and it's hardest when you're wounded. Betrayal invites retaliation, but justice isn't revenge. It's restraint guided by principle, fairness over impulse, balance over bitterness. Then there is temperance, the virtue most ignored today. In a world addicted to excess, temperance draws boundaries. Enough is enough. More isn't. Better, faster isn't wiser. It keeps desire from becoming your master. Together, these virtues aren't ideals on a page. They are practices. They steady you when life pulls you apart. They give you poise under pressure. You won't be perfect. That's not the goal. Alignment is. When your actions reflect your values, when your choices echo your truth. Virtue doesn't announce itself. It shows up when no one is watching, when the easier path beckons, when life tests you. It becomes the framework that holds you upright. You don't need permission. You don't need a crisis. Just the decision, repeated, to pause before reacting, to breathe before judging, to choose depth over impulse. That's how you become unshakable, not by avoiding storms, but by standing inside them with a steady heart. Impulse is impatient. It demands action now. It ignores tomorrow, consequences, cost. It's loud, urgent, often misguided. Discipline is quieter. It waits. It observes. It asks questions before moving. It protects what matters. Your peace, your integrity, your direction. Every time you pause, you strengthen that discipline. Not with force, but with clarity. Imagine a world ruled by impulse, anger turning to violence, sadness to isolation, insecurity to attack. That world wouldn't survive, yet many live inside it, not because they're broken, but because they were never shown another way. You don't have to live there. Emotion becomes dangerous only when it becomes authority, when you obey it blindly. Regret isn't from feeling, it's from failing to pause. The person who hurt you doesn't control you. unless you hand them the power over your response. True strength isn't suppressing emotion, it's opening the door, listening, understanding the message, and then choosing your response deliberately, not from ego, not from fear, but from truth. Adversity is necessary, Seneca said. Without it, you never get the chance to prove yourself. Your emotions aren't obstacles, they're entry points. They reveal what unsettles you, what triggers you, what still wields influence, and they reveal your capacity to remain present, to tolerate discomfort, to stay grounded when escape seems easier. Each time you do that, you reclaim something essential. Don't fear emotion. Fear the belief that it controls you. Some of the strongest people feel most deeply. They've simply learned how to hold feelings without being consumed by them. That's what grounds them. That's what makes them trusted. That's what keeps them steady in a world that never slows. Freedom doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from meeting it fully and choosing your next move from presence, not panic. Emotion may visit, but it no longer rules. That was the Stoic insight. And it still holds today. Power doesn't come from feeling less. It comes from using the space between feeling and action to choose who you become. You won't master this overnight. Some days you'll react. Some days you'll retreat too soon. That's part of learning. The goal isn't perfection. It's shortening the distance between impulse and reflection, studying your triggers instead of judging them, responding as a student, not a victim. That's how patterns break. That's how self-trust grows. Emotions deliver the message. You write the ending. Once you understand that, your relationship with your mind changes. You stop fearing it. You begin working with it. Real control doesn't mean forcing stillness. It means standing steady while everything inside you moves. Quiet confidence comes from not being ruled by what you feel, not denying it, not drowning in it, but standing inside it, breathing, choosing, acting with intention, not to impress, but to stay aligned with who you're becoming. That choice, to live aligned, is one of the most powerful you'll ever make. The world will provoke you, test you, try to pull you off center. Your task: stay grounded, stay clear. Use the space between impulse and action. That space is where leadership begins, where a life forms guided by intention, not reaction, where emotions are honored but not obeyed. That's how you become calm in chaos, clear in conflict, unmoved by noise, deeply, unmistakably alive. Everything begins with discipline. You were never meant to be finished. Not at birth, not now, not ever. You are movement, process, becoming. You are not a label, not a checklist, not your worst moment, not your deepest scar, not even your greatest achievement. You are far more important than all of that. You are the one holding the chisel. Life doesn't hand you perfection. It hands you raw material, heavy, unfinished, cracked in places. The marble arrives, uneven, unpolished, sometimes damaged. But that was never the problem. The truth is this: you are both the sculptor and the sculpture. Most people never realize that. They move through life believing they are the stone, that circumstances define them, that mistakes seal their shape. They say it's too late, too broken, too far behind, too much damage done. None of that becomes true unless you accept it as final. Unless you put the chisel down and declare the work over. That's the real loss. Not flawed material, but forgotten agency. You weren't born fixed. You were born equipped, with thought, with choice, with action, with reflection, with the courage to begin again. It's easy to blame the marble, to point at the cracks and say, "This is what life gave me." But the Stoics never taught complaint. They taught responsibility. This is what I have. Now, what will I make of it? Every decision you make is a strike of the chisel. Wake early to protect your peace instead of feeding distraction. That's a cut. Choose restraint over indulgence. That's refinement. Pause before reacting in anger or fear. That's precision. Moment by moment, the shape begins to change. It's slow, it's subtle, but it's real, and over time, a form emerges, one that looks more and more like who you were meant to become. The chisel isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's the silence you choose instead of defending your ego. Sometimes it's a boundary, set with a shaking voice. Sometimes it's simply not quitting. One more repetition, one more hour, one more step forward. These moments don't get applause, but they define you. While the world waits for dramatic breakthroughs, real greatness is formed quietly, in effort, in consistency, in the space between chaos and clarity. No one else can sculpt your life. Others may advise, they may criticize, they may hand you tools, but they don't guide your hands. Only you decide whether today's choices echo regret or resilience. Only you choose whether to carry the chisel or point blame. That forgotten power to shape yourself through action is everything. You are allowed to evolve, to change direction, to say, this way no longer fits me. That isn't failure, that's mastery. A sculptor doesn't panic when something breaks away. They adjust, they rework the vision, they adapt. That flexibility, combined with purpose, is what it means to be human. Your masterpiece isn't behind you. It exists in every future moment you choose to keep shaping. The marble was never the issue. The issue is forgetting how much can be created from imperfect material. Some of the most meaningful lives were shaped from trauma, loss, and abandonment. Not because life was gentle, but because pain was turned into depth. They didn't sculpt perfection. They sculpted meaning. Not surface-level beauty, but substance. Too many wait for better conditions. A cleaner slate. A perfect starting point. Waiting doesn't shape anything. Waiting leaves the marble untouched, and neglect erodes potential faster than failure ever could. Life doesn't ask you to wait. It asks you to engage, to work with what you have, where you are, now. While others wait to feel ready, you can be carving, turning chaos into clarity, stress into stillness, pain into purpose.